Israel and Iran are trading strikes this morning in the most significant exchange of fire since the tenuous April truce. The ramped-up hostilities began over the weekend when Israel launched airstrikes on Beirut, which President Trump had told Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu not to do in an explosive call last week. Israeli attacks in Lebanon are a major sticking point in negotiations to end the war and a red line for Iran. Tehran, which has insisted Lebanon be included in any deal, retaliated by firing missiles at Israel for the first time in 2 months. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps called the attack a warning, saying future responses would be broader, in their words. Israel then responded by launching strikes toward Tehran, with Iranian state media reporting the sound of explosions in cities across Iran, adding that a chemical plant was hit. This despite Axios reporting that President Trump urged Netanyahu to hold off on any retaliatory act in a Sunday phone call. That's according to a senior U.S. official and an Israeli source familiar with the details of the call. President Trump also told the Financial Times on Sunday that Netanyahu had no choice but to accept a deal with Iran, saying, quote, "I call the shots. He doesn't call the shots." Also this morning, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen joined the war for the first time since the ceasefire, firing missiles themselves toward Israel, too. It's a lot for us to get to. Retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos is here on set with me. He's an MS Now national security and intelligence analyst. So put this into perspective for us, because when you see these back and forths reignited, already we knew that the U.S. and Iran had been trading what the U.S. has called self-defense strikes in Iran over the course of the last few weeks. This feels like a bigger deal, though, is it?
So it is. You know, we do have a bit of escalation now. And let me just say, when Iran has done anything against the U.S., we have retaliated immediately. Yeah. So the notion that Israel wouldn't do so after yesterday, that would go against all Israeli national security doctrine. And in some ways, Prime Minister Netanyahu, whatever you feel about him, the Israelis had to respond. That, again, would go against just decades of what the Israelis really practice. And so now we're at a point now in which clearly the U.S.-Iran ceasefire is holding, but in terms of Israel and Iran, it's not. And even as we speak right now, there is still incoming Iranian fire, and the Israelis are retaliating as well. So the big question is, as they climb up the escalatory ladder, is it going to be a point where both sides kind of step back and say, okay, that's enough now, or does this keep going? An Israeli official, I just read a press report, said they expect several days of this now.
Several days of this, and so that it begs a few questions, the first of which is, if the U.S. is trying to get us back into a ceasefire posture or acknowledging that they still think a ceasefire is in place, they've been using this term, and it is difficult to believe that it's still in place when you're seeing shots fired back and forth. But if the U.S. wants that and the Israelis are continuing in this posture, where does that leave us?
Right. The big question is, what is the delta between the U.S. and Israel right now? It is absolutely clear, I think, to everyone involved that President Trump desperately wants a deal. Unfortunately, the Iranians know this as well. The sticking point, Ali, it has to do with kind of this whatever financial relief ultimately that Iran receives. Their economy is in tatters. They desperately want an infusion of funds. The problem that President Trump has, as much as he wants a deal, is he is subject to the famous saying we always talk about, is this a JCPOA 2.0, another Barack Obama-type deal that he has lambasted for years. But at the end of the day, if there is going to be a deal, it's going to involve something like that. And, of course, throw on top of that, the Israelis don't want to see that at all.
Exactly. Yep. And I wonder, as we look ahead to not just the next few hours, but the next few days, if this is something that escalates to that amount of time, what is the best case scenario that you could see in the coming hours and days, and the worst case scenario that shows that this is a ceasefire that is well off of its hinges and very difficult to put back in place? So
I think the worst case scenario is a bit easier in the sense of everything just falls apart. There is no deal whatsoever to be had, and the Israelis in particular start hitting targets inside Iran related to the energy infrastructure. So everything falls apart. Best case, and I think this is what President Trump is certainly hoping for, is that even these Israeli attacks show the Iranians that there's a price to pay. And so will this actually force them to the negotiating table? The problem, of course, is that the Iranians think they can withstand this type of pain, whatever Israel is inflicting on them. So best case is that somehow it helps the negotiations. I don't see it going that way. And again, we're back to where we were, despite every once in a while I come on the show and we talk about potential hope.
I know.
I don't think anyone has that right now, except the government of Pakistan, who still is putting out these kind of rosy scenarios that I don't think anybody believes at this point.
And even one of our MS Now contributors has some reporting that says from the Iranian side or from some folks who are trying to help these negotiations along that the Iranians are not inclined to continue to negotiate with President Trump at this point. So, again, that can change, but that is sort of the state of play, at least as we understand it right now. The president, of course, was asked about this in this testy interview with Meet the Press, but he also walked out of it, taped Friday while he was in Wisconsin. Yet host Kristen Welker repeatedly pushed back on the president's false claims about the January 6th insurrection and election fraud. She also pressed him on his 2024 campaign promise that he wouldn't start any wars in his second term.
First of all, I didn't guarantee no war. Why would I have built the strongest military in the world? I built our military. I inherited a terrible military. We had no equipment. We had nothing. I built a tremendous military. Biden gave a lot of it away, but it's still a relatively small portion compared to what I built.
But you said it over and over again, Mr.
Why would
President?
I build a military? Now, I didn't want to use this, but I'm doing you and everybody else a big favor. In the midst of the greatest stock market in history, in the midst of the most successful country, because as you know, in the last term, we were a dead country, Kristen. I know you're a big liberal, we're a big progressive.
No, but I'm just a journalist.
We were a dead country. A year ago, a couple of years ago, we were a dead country. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. And at the all-time hottest point, which is probably now, believe it or not, we just had all brand new stock market records today. But at the hottest point in the history of our country, I took Scott, Howard, I took Pete, I took everybody into a room. I said, I have to do this country, this world, the Middle East, Israel, everybody a favor.
Anyone who attacked police officers on January 6th should get taxpayer money?
I wouldn't be inclined to say so, but I have to see it. I can tell you this, 97% of those people, you look at them, the FBI or whoever it was, because you had a lot of crooked cops, you had dirty cops. Comey was a dirty cop.
Well,
a guy
no
like Bolton was a dirty
but
cop.
There's no evidence.
Wait a minute. Oh, you think Comey was a straight
people
cop?
who pleaded guilty to assaulting police
Comey
officers.
was a dirty cop.
No, but
they
the
had
people
FBI.
who assaulted police
Listen
officers.
to me. They had FBI agents ushering them into the building. They had FBI go into the building. Those people walking around, they're looking, oh, isn't this nice? They weren't in. They were being ushered into the building.
Sir. There's no evidence.
You had a bunch of dirty cops, and frankly, what they did was weaponization of our government.
But, sir,
let me tell you, it's 4 days, and they aren't even close to coming up with it.
That's how they count.
You know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence to support that?
All I have to do is look. All I have to do is look.
That's not evidence.
And I listen to people, and let's see what happens.
But, sir, that's not evidence.
Do you think it's appropriate?
That's how they count the votes in California.
Do you think it's appropriate that they have an election, and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner?
State and local officials acknowledge they are slow. They're urging.
No, they're crooked.
They're urging the votes to be counted quickly. That's how they vote in California.
They're crooked, just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked.
To be fair, I'm not crooked, but let's
Really?
Let's
well,
continue.
You play right into their hands.
Let's continue.
You're either crooked or you're stupid. You play right into their hands with this rap. You know that these elections are rigged. Your network knows that they're rigged. You know that I won an election in a landslide, and I got 94% bad press.
But, Mr. President,
you know why I got that? Because you have no credibility.
But you've never presented evidence that it was rigged. Let's keep talking about. I want to talk about Todd
You
Blanche.
have more evidence. There's more evidence than ever presented.
Moments later, the president took off his microphone and walked away from that interview. Of course, there is no proof of election fraud in 2020 or any other election. More than 60 lawsuits were filed challenging the 2020 results. Nearly every case was rejected or dismissed for lack of proof or credibility, many by Republican-appointed judges. Trump just lost that election. As for January 6th, even FBI Director Kash Patel has dunked the president's claims, telling Fox News while there were agents on hand, they were sent in after the riot had begun to try to control the unruly crowd. The president also repeatedly told crowds during his 2024 campaign that he would not start new wars, including in his victory speech, saying, quote, "I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars." There's so much for us to unpack there, Mark. We also just should emphasize the fact that Kristen Welker is an exceptional journalist, and I thought she did a great job there fact-checking the president. But when you take in totality that he's saying he wasn't going to start new wars, which, of course, he has. We were just talking about Iran. And then, of course, the fact that he's doubling back down on these rigged election claims at a point where he has appointed an acting director of national intelligence in Bill Pulte, who has been someone who's helped him try to enact some of his legal efforts against perceived political foes. And now Trump is talking about, OK, he'll be there in a temporary capacity, but he's going to do some things on rigged elections. I mean, you know the role of a DNI better than anybody. What might that look like? And should there be even more concern about the way that the president's rhetoric might be matched by someone who he's put into this kind of a role now?
So I think there's two things to unpack. Well, there's lots of things to unpack about this. But one of them, let's just, before we address the DNI part, is just the idea of you want a president to be kind of sober and mature and measured. Getting angry like that and storming off. I mean, if someone who is talking to a journalist just because it's raining out and it's loud and noisy and he gets exasperated and storms off, that's not who you want, to have the nuclear codes in your hand. So just for that alone, that was disturbing. The second part of it, though, Ali, is really important because Bill Pulte, the new acting director of national intelligence, is a political hack. We know that. We know what he did as the housing guy in terms of going after Trump's opponents. But the director of national intelligence oversees 18 U.S. intelligence agencies, incredibly powerful tools of surveillance, of things in which, if it's put in the wrong hands, can be rather damaging. So you do have to wonder, is the DNI going to be weaponized like that? That is the worst case scenario. And I think the fears are absolutely real. And you did see a lot of pushback, including from some members of the GOP. Yeah. On the other hand, though, there is the idea of will he then kind of proceed to downsize the DNI? So it's the weaponized portion or downsized. And Senator Cotton, who I think we do have to kind of look for, the head of the Senate Select Committee of Intelligence, has said he actually supports the downsizing of the office. And that's a substantive policy issue, which does deserve debate. So we're going to see where it goes. Or, of course, is it both? Weaponized and downsized. But, the fears in the national security establishment are acute. They go across the political aisle. Every Republican friend of mine who I've talked to does not like this appointment whatsoever. So I do think there's reason for concern.
Yeah, because he has absolutely no national security experience and is being put in this role. Mark, you came on, you covered a lot, as you always do. We thank you, as always, and